So tonight, this Shabbat, I thought I would share with you a wonderful drash, a wonderful article about this week's Parsha, Kitavo, which was written by Rabbi Bradley Shavit Artson, who is the dean of the Ziegler School of Rabbinic Studies in Los Angeles. And we quote him often and cite him often. You're such a good executive director. You're so good. I said air conditioning. You went to go like a Jewish guy can fix an air conditioning system. But God bless you, Ian, for trying. Yes. You know it's a 20-year-old building, and the chapel one is getting fixed. And this is bad if this one breaks and the well, you know me. You'll all be really happy though if the air conditioner breaks. Ian, they'll be very happy. So maybe on that side we'll have a new thing, a mechitza. Those who are like Rabbi Khan, because I have early onset menopause, will be on this side of the room. You never thought you'd hear a rabbi say that. And those who are not like me will sit on that side of the room. It'll be a mechitza. So I wanted to read Rabbi Shavit Artson's rather than using selections of it, because it's really a wonderful article about how it is in Judaism we feel about love, or understand, I should say, love and law. The article is entitled, Law, Not Love, is the Opposite of Hate. Often we think about love and hate being opposites. But as you're going to hear in a moment, Rabbi Artson states that it is law, mitzvot, or mitzvahs, not love, that is the opposite of hate. And he gleans it from a wonderful verse in our Parsha. If you remember a few weeks ago when we learned from Ve'et Hanan and from the V'ahavta, which is in Ve'et Hanan, it starts with that famous phrase that most of us know by heart, you shall love Adonai your God with all of your heart, with all of your soul, and with all your being. Love. Ahava. Here's what he says. Human beings never seem able to express all their hatred for each other. Men and women war against each other. Blacks and whites, gays and straight, liberals and conservatives, city folk and suburbanites. There is no end to stereotypes, hostility, and mistrust. In response to this propensity to hate, Elie Wiesel, of blessed memory, organized an international conference on hate in, of course, Oslo, Norway. This was several years ago, this International Conference of Hate. The glittering list of invited participants included 4 presidents, 70 writers, many scientists, and academics. The 2 questions which shaped their deliberations were, number 1, why do people hate? And number 2, why do people band together to express hatred? Although the speeches were beautiful and the resolutions were firm, the entire event was fairly predictable, except for their primary conclusion, which seems so at odds with common sense. Ask anyone what the opposite of hate is, and they will tell you it's love. But the consensus of these who attended Elie Wiesel's conference, of these very accomplished and powerful and thoughtful people, was, quote, only the belief in and execution of the law can defeat hatred. This, of course, is a fundamental guiding principle for us as Americans. In other words, the opposite of hate is law, not love. The Prime Minister of Norway even bolstered that claim by quoting from the statesman philosopher Edmund Burke, who was from 18th century England, that, quote, when bad people combine, the good must associate, else they will fall one by one. While this insight might be news to the largely Christian West, it merely confirms the age-old conviction of Judaism, that law is the indispensable expression of love and decency. A people abandons law at the peril of their own character, justice, and survival. The Torah portion, Kitavo, for this Shabbat, understands that need for law. As we discussed, by the way, this is me now, last week, 74 of the 613 mitzvot were in last week's Parsha, Ki Tetzei, over 10% of all mitzvot in one Torah portion alone. And this week's Parsha Kitavo continues with that theme. Our Torah portion understands the need for law for mitzvot, insisting, as it says, Adonai your God commands you this day to observe these laws and rules, to observe them faithfully with all your heart, asher libo, and all of your soul. Why is law essential to Judaism? Without clear standards of communal behavior and individual rectitude, each person is forced to fall back on their own sense of right and wrong. Without external guidelines, the sense can all too easily become simply a way to excuse one's own predilections and to overlook one's own weaknesses. In other words, if we don't have laws, then we have people in the abstract deciding what is good and what is bad and justifying their behavior and saying, well, that may not be good or right for you, but it is for me, and therefore I can do whatever I want to do. But that's not how the Torah works. That's not how Judaism works. Many of you know halacha, Jewish law, provides the second opinion, if you will. It's almost like a commentary, integrating the claims of conscience with the will of God and the wisdom of our rabbinic sages. In addition to establishing a context for moral decisions, Jewish law, halacha, which means the path or the way, also allows for community cohesiveness. Without a binding structure for maintaining this consensus, Judaism dissolves into a combination of nostalgia, history, good intentions, and contemporary politics. No longer, meaning the state of Israel, the Jewish state, no longer able to hold together a people, each individual fashions their own faith out of the inherited remains of the past, and then everybody calls their own hodgepodge buffet, if you will, of Judaism itself. That's what we're experiencing in North America, Jewish communities now. I do and pick and choose the pieces that I like. I throw everything else out, including many of the core concepts and principles of Judaism, and I call it Jewish. In other words, in the postmodern world, what feels good to me is good enough. What I like to do is good enough, and I call it Judaism because that's what I decided. But halakha doesn't work that way, but it tries to bridge the gap between strict observance of law and autonomy, which is what Reform Judaism is all about. Back to Rabbi Artson. Halakha cuts through this sloppy hodgepodge, forcing people to integrate the needs of the community, the neighbors, and co-religionists, an awareness of God and the sacred, and the highest ideals of human morality. In an age of lonely individuals coming together to try to foster a sense of meaning without impinging on autonomy, Jewish law forges us into a community with a framework to channel and guide our individuality. In other words, Judaism says, as an example, you should mourn, privately mourn for the loss of a mother or father, a sister or brother, or any individual, member of your family. But when Shabbat comes, you press pause on your individual mourning because the community celebration of Shabbat, in many senses and in many regards, not only pauses, but suspends your mourning. In other words, I give up my need as an individual mourner for the greater good of the community, which is celebrating Shabbat. I was just speaking to a family today as we were preparing for a funeral for Bob Switsky on Monday. And I said, you'll have Shiva, and then Shloshim, the 30-day mourning period, will stop at the beginning of Rosh Hashanah. That is an example, a perfect example of how the community's celebration of the New Year actually suspends your individual ritual of mourning when you're not supposed to leave the house and do certain things. Doesn't mean that you stop mourning, it just means that you stop what's called private mourning. Rabbi Artson continues and concludes, Halacha extends the realm of the sacred and the moral beyond a once a week or once a year peek into a prayer book or a machzor or going to synagogue. Instead, Judaism becomes the prism through which we refract all rays of light in every aspect of our lives, sanctifying and elevating every moment, every deed, and every place. It's what we call looking at the world through Jewish eyes, which is what we do at camp and what we attempt to do at shul, at synagogue, in preschool, during services. How do we look at the world through Jewish eyes? How do we suspend what it is that we do the rest of the week on Shabbat and bring ourselves closer together through communal prayer? In the words of Rabbi Pinchas in a midrash, whatever you do, the mitzvot come with you. If you build a house, if you make a door, think about the V'ahavta. If you build a house, if you make a door, if you buy new clothes, if you have your hair cut, if you plow your field, if you sow your field, if you gather the harvest, God said, even when you are not occupied with anything, but are just taking a walk, the mitzvot walk with you. And it is very cool, like this side of the room cool, when you can associate and synthesize every act, every deed, even the most mundane, with doing a mitzvah. Then you know what it means to not just be Jewish, but to do Jewish and feel Jewish. Jewish law, then, is the powerhouse that has maintained Jewish unity, purpose, and vigor throughout the ages. Through our Jewish law, our halacha, our legal system, we reach beyond our drives to attain our aspirations, beyond our flaws to embody our individual ideals. As they have been for thousands of years, the law of the Torah, the Talmud, the code of Jewish law, summon all of us to aim higher, to become the earthly representatives of the sacred and the sublime, and as I often say, to become active participants in the ongoing creation of the world as partners with God. In the words of the Midrash, Jewish law allows us to let our doings be for the sake of heaven, revering and loving God, feeling awe and feeling joy toward all the mitzvot. Take a stand against hatred. If you want to take a stand against hatred, all you need to do is a mitzvah. And so on this Shabbat, as we contemplate this idea that not just living Jewishly or seeing the world through Jewish eyes, but really embracing and engaging every moment as a moment where we are fulfilling a mitzvah. Everything that we do can go back to the 613, or a Talmudic interpretation, halachic interpretation, that if we put the needs of the community before our own individual needs, that if we understand what the community needs in order to function before we go into our own egos and our own senses of entitlement and what we want, the selfishness that we have, if we do all of these things, then we are able to fulfill that mitzvah from this Torah portion, to observe the commandments this day, to observe the laws and the rituals and the rites, all of them faithfully with all of our heart and all of our soul. So as we are in this middle of Elul, in the middle of the time of contemplation and reflection and zchot, of asking forgiveness and thinking about our year that has passed, all of ours, let's think about how in this coming year and in these coming days, as we prepare for a new year, we can begin to again and again not only put the community first and the needs of the community first, but realize and understand that if we want to abolish hatred, the kind of hatred we've been seeing for these last several weeks and months and years, not only in our own community but in the country itself, the only way to do that is together and through mitzvot, through seeing the world through Jewish eyes and knowing that we indeed as individuals and as a community can make a difference. We are the answer. We are the antidote to hate. Shabbat Shalom.